If your problems won't go away and you're worried night and day, hand it over. Get on your knees and pray. If you're sick, feeling low, got no money, nowhere to go, hand it over. Get on your knees and pray. Hand it over.
Hand it over.
Hand it over.
Hand it over.
Give it up. Give it over.
Give it over.
Hand it over. Get on your knees and pray.
So Lent is about handing it over, isn't it? Okay, this is the third Sunday in Lent. What does Lent stand for? Let's eliminate negative thinking. All right, you get an A. So in the Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown is confronted by Lucy, who says to Charlie Brown, "You are the crabgrass in the lawn of life." Any crabgrasses in your life? My family and I moved into a new home in September. And the reason we loved it so much wasn't so much about the house, but it was about the yard. And there was this lush lawn, and there's fruit trees, there's 5 mango trees, and lychee trees, and Logan trees, and banana trees, coconut trees, papaya trees, and grapes. It just was a paradise. And a friend who came to visit when we first moved in said, "Oh, this is a lot of work." I didn't have a clue. I just thought it was beautiful. I didn't know about the pruning and the fertilizing and the watering and the weeding. And no matter how many weeds you pulled out, there were still more weeds. So I've been here for 10 years. And up until Reverend Therese came to give me a little bit of a break, I was doing a Sunday talk every Sunday. Do you know, after a while, it's like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna talk about? And there I was this week going, what am I gonna talk about? And I looked out and I saw the lawn, and a lawn company had just stopped by the house because they noticed how bad our lawn was. Well, I don't know about chinch bugs, but we got them. And disease and fungus and weeds and hardly any grass left at all. What happened? What happened to that gorgeous lawn we saw last August? Well, we hadn't been fertilizing it. We hadn't been watering it. We really hadn't been doing much except trying to pull some weeds out. We learned that unless you have a healthy lawn, you're just going to keep growing weeds, right? You guys know that. So for the 5 months we hadn't done anything, the sprinkler system was broken. We hadn't been maintaining that lawn. So I went, wow, that's what we have to do with our minds, isn't it? Or it just gets full of weeds. So today's talk is mind maintenance. I like that one. So is it? It's wheatgrass. Well, we want to grow that, right? So our mind is like positive thoughts. I have to nurture it. I have to feed it. I have to water it. Otherwise, it gets filled with negative thoughts. Like Lucy says, I have crabgrass in my life, right? Everything starts to look seedy and weedy. So I found this story and this is a true story about a large city in the Northeast, that in an attempt to reclaim blocks of the downtown slum area that had been come over with crime and filth, they went in and they demolished all the abandoned and the rundown buildings. And then they repaired and painted what was left, cleaned up the trash out of the streets, and then they left. They made it pretty again. But what they didn't realize was that wasn't enough. And so the buildings became run down again. I watched this in the area I'm from in Connecticut, I watched the exact same thing happen. The buildings became run down again. The crime returned again. The trash built up again. And the area became just as bad as it had been before. So what they realized was it wasn't enough to remove the structures, to paint them. They had to replace them with something better. And then they had to maintain it. So they leased it out to a construction company who went in and put up shopping malls and theaters and new apartment buildings. And then they put in a permanent maintenance company. You know what? The slums didn't return. To eliminate negative thinking, repairing and painting over those old ugly beliefs, we don't get rid of them. We have to replace them with positive thoughts. And those thoughts have to be maintained. So those weeds, those crabgrasses in our life, they're highly adaptable, aren't they? They grow just about anywhere where good plants won't grow. And they're sneaky, right? I mean, I'm over here pulling one out, and the next thing you know, the next day, the same weed is over here. And those roots, if I don't get down and get my trowel and dig those roots out, they just keep coming up. So, when I go and pull out my judgmental weed, what happens if I haven't gotten the root? And someone or something shows up in my life that's just a little different than I want it to be. What happens to my judgment? It's right back there, isn't it? It pops up again. And I pull out my I'm not good enough weed, but I didn't get the root out. And then someone gets a raise or a job instead of me. And I'm like, oh, gee, I guess I wasn't good enough for that. I pull out my impatient weed. And then I have to go to the MVD department and wait in line. I can pull out my controlling weed, my critical weed, my manipulating weed, my get even weed, my victim weed, my untrusting weeds, but if I don't get the root out, it comes back. Just like the crabgrass, just like the weeds that took over our lawn. And New Testament talks about this so much. Mark 4:3-8. Jesus likes to talk about the sower. You'll notice a lot of the parables are aimed at farming because the people that he was speaking to mainly were farmers. A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seed fell along the path, and the birds came and ate them. You've heard this one, right? Others fell on rocky ground. They had no depth for their root. So when they sprouted out, the sun came out and scorched them. Others fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Others fell into good soil and brought forth grain, growing and increasing 30, 60, and 100-fold. You know, I can use all my energy pulling weeds out over and over again, trying to keep my negative thoughts at bay. And I become exhausted, discouraged, and watch them come up over and over again. And the problem isn't the weeds. The problem is my soil. And the best way to control weeds, the best way to control negative thinking is with good soil. Because something amazing happens when I use good soil. The healthy grass grows. And you know what I learned from these wonderful lawn care people? That healthy grass is actually stronger than the weeds. And so if I nourish that healthy grass, it grows, it spreads, it gets deeper roots, and it starts to choke out the weeds. The weeds can't grow. And the really cool thing is that grass grows slower than weeds. So guess what? You don't have to cut the lawn as often. That's worth it there, isn't it? So we have to pay attention here in Florida. We have to water, we have to fertilize, we have to weed. But what happens? We get these nice, hot, humid Florida days. I don't feel like going out there and weeding. So it's a little easier to surrender to those weeds, isn't it? And maybe if I ignore them, maybe I settle for less than a perfect lawn, and maybe if I'm really nice to my neighbors, They won't notice it. So it's easy to ignore our spiritual maintenance. It's easy to let negative thoughts take over our mind and be real nice to people and hope they don't notice my weeds. So yesterday, Kathy Beasley did a workshop for us. If you were in that class, come on up. Heidi, Karen, Michael, Arlene, John. Yes, you are. Who else? Do I have everybody who was in that class up here?
I got a big head.
Is this on, Lizzie? So what we do to help control those weeds is we come to some of these classes and these workshops and we discover what weeds we have to pull out. So Kathy introduced us to this thing called sacred reading. And we each drew a card by one of my teachers a long time ago, Sonia Choquette. And you know when you draw cards, you draw the one you have to work with. So I'm going to just let them all share the card they drew and what their job was. Okay.
My card was number 13, forgive and forget.
Ah, now isn't that a weed we think we're working with, and then sometimes we don't get it all out until we have to forgive or forget somebody again?
Mine was keep faith, and it was about knowing the divine plan and divine timing.
Mine was about judgment, which has been coming up like a real big weed for me lately.
Mine was make better choices. Yeah, I needed that one. Had 2 ex-wives to prove it.
I don't remember what
I forget what mine was. It was actually it was to pay attention. Focus. Pay attention.
And so we all went through and kind of in this order and read these and looked at them. I'm getting there. I'm getting there because as you heard all these, listen to one he pulled.
Mine was number 59, was count your blessings.
And so what we're learning, okay, thank you guys, and you can dance your way back. And so we get to pay attention. Sometimes I think I've pulled the roots out of that thought, of that negative thinking, to find out, something happens and it pops back up again. But watching John, he has been so working on his prosperity. He's leading the Prosperity Plus class. And I watched this keep growing in his life. I watched the blessings continue to grow in his life. So it's no accident that was the card he pulled. The longer those weeds are there, the longer those negative thoughts are there, and some of them start when we're kids, the harder they are to remove. And they spread, and those roots keep getting deeper. So the negative thoughts, they're like those thorns the scripture talked about. They overcome and they choke out our positive thinking if we leave them there. So critical judgment of myself, of others, frequently complaining and berating, worrying about what might go wrong in the future, worrying about what happened in the past. I'm not creating good soil for positive thoughts, am I? I'm creating soil where my positive thoughts can be eaten by the birds. Those negative influences of the people that come and they just kind of pick out that positive thinking I have. Or I'm creating a ground that's so rocky that when my positive thoughts start to grow, they can't root and they get scorched by any heat that happens in my life. When a conflict or confrontation arises, they just disappear. If I'm not maintaining my mind, I'm creating, and we talked about this last week, I'm creating my own happiness. I'm creating my own what? Last week, what did we talk about? What am I creating? Hell? Creating my own hell, right? The more positive negative thoughts I have. So, ask yourself, what weeds are the root of my unhappiness? What weed is the root of my unhappiness? What weed do I have to pull from my lawn? Do I have to make sure that I get the root of? And what you're going to find is not something that's happening in your life. It's not a situation. It's not an event. It's not a person. It's what my mind is telling me about that person, that situation, or that event, isn't it? So don't let weeds grow in your mind and choke out your happiness. Keep weeding. Keep weeding. Don't surrender. Don't ignore those negative thoughts. Each time you pull a weed, and we call this affirmations, denials, and unity. Each time you pull a weed, you've got to put a positive thought in place. You've got to put a positive seed in there. A seed of kindness, a seed of compassion, a seed of forgiveness, a seed of understanding, a seed of wisdom, a seed of strength, a seed of unconditional love. Because we know with that seed, there's no negative thinking, there's no weeds that can grow. Then they have to be maintained. And what I discovered as we worked through this process yesterday was, even though I meditate, I'd been letting go of some of my meditation time. Meditation time, prayer time is so important to keep our thoughts positive. Hanging out with people like this that think the same way you do. Coming to classes, coming to workshops like the one we had yesterday. I can't ignore my mind. I can't let it just grow and spread those weeds and do whatever it wants. I have to maintain it. And you're here and you have such sources to maintain. You know, pick up the book you pick up, the music you listen to. When I go out to the garage and John's working out there, he's always listening to, what's that radio station you listen to? Empower Music, the Posse, where the Posse people, he's always got that on. You can't help going in the garage and just feeling great after listening to it. When we do that, our positive thoughts, they grow deeper, they grow stronger, until there's no place for weeds to grow. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful to go through the next 5 minutes without a negative thought? Underneath those weeds, what we discover is a dimension of consciousness that's the good soil. And that's where our happiness springs from. When we can get to that good soil, when we can fertilize it, when we can water it, then our happiness grows 30, 60, and 100-fold. So this week, this Lent, let's eliminate negative thinking through mind maintenance. God bless you.